Here's a quick insight. Simple things are never boring. And it is only complex things that get eventually boring. So, as much as a thing exists in its simple form, which usually the most simple things, the most simple form of something, it's usually also very close to its beginning, very close to its origins, to its origins. So somehow simplicity is ties us back to origins, while complexity, if you look at it, complexity is that which departs more and more from the origins of something. For example, you have essential oils, and you have an essential oil of pine, an essential oil of roses, an essential oil of lavender. See, these are base essences. They are base essences. But then you can mix them together. You can mix pine with rose. And then you have a new essence. But now this new essence is a compound of these two original, let's say, base essences. And then you can add a third one. And then you can add a fourth one. And the compound becomes more and more complex. And that's usually what we call a perfume. But see, there is this conundrum, like a perfume is really, really nice. Scents. We all love perfumes. Beautiful scents, beautiful smells. But there is this thing with perfumes, see, that even though a perfume it is so beautiful, eventually there is the tendency, there is a tendency that eventually you are gonna get bored with it. But try to go back to the base essences, like simple pine essence, simple rose essence, and you can see that it's like you can never truly get bored of them necessarily. It's just, it's like, how can you get bored of the essence of pine? It's always so rejuvenating, right? Or the essence of roses, if for the ones which like roses, because there are people which don't prefer the smell of roses, but I'm talking generally right now for the ones which prefer, let's say, the smell of roses. How can you truly get bored of the smell of roses? But see, at first, a perfume which is much more complex, it's very enticing. You can wear it for much time without necessarily getting bored of it. But after some point, you will want a different one. You'll want to try a different perfume. And of course, you won't smell even if you go back to the base essences like pine and rose, and you won't stay with them stuck on your nose all day long. So you won't smell them all day long because it's just gonna be too much. But I'm just referring now to the feeling of enticement, desensitizing, anyway, versus the feeling of boredom. For example, a pine, you can't smell it all day long because it's just gonna be too much. But see, at least for me, it feels like I can't smell it because it's gonna be too much, but not because I'm gonna get bored of it. It doesn't bring up that feeling of boredom. It's like, oh, I just know it all now. It's just, I know it. But with a perfume, a much more complex compound, I can feel like, oh, I know it. It's nice. What else do you have? I want to smell the others as well. So, see, the idea is that when you move into complexity, you're becoming more and more enamored with complexity and you want to see more, 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 more. And you want to jump from this version of or this thing to that other thing, and then from that thing to that other thing, and then from that other thing to that other thing. It's just spirals on and on and on. You see, when you start moving into complexity, you just want to continue to move into more and more and more complexity. It's like you're never truly satisfied. As much as you move more and more into complexity, you lose satisfaction somehow. It's because I believe that the essence of a thing lies in its simplicity. And see, when you are so close to the essence of a thing, it's like being close to the essence of life. Like, how can you get truly bored with life? But as you move more and more into complexity, you lose the essence. That's where I'm getting at. You lose the essence of a thing, or the essence becomes more and more diluted, or sometimes distorted. And thus you lose touch with that base essence. You lose touch with essence, period. So as we move more and more into complexity, we lose touch with essence. But as we come back more and more to simplicity, we regain again touch. We touch base again with essence. We feel more and more rejuvenated by the simple things. But as much as we invent more and more complex things, we feel more and more unsatisfied. It's like something is missing, but you can't put your finger on what. What's exactly missing? Nobody can truly say what exactly is the difference, for example, from, let's say, I'll take the example of a digitalized guitar, one of these electric guitars, and a normal guitar. Or, yeah, let's just stick with this example, or just digital music that you can create it via a synthesizer, like the DJs are doing, right? So digital music, which you can create it through all those synthesizers and all those options, and you have so many plethora of being able to morph the sound and make it, and then you take that complex type of, let's say, techno music, or which is done through all of those synthesizers and devices, and different tracks, different plays, different mixed together there. It's such a complex melody. And then you take that and you compare it to the simple sound of a violin, of a actual violin. Let's say you're sitting in a room with somebody which knows how to play the violin, and it just plays a simple tune on the violin in the room with you. And take the experience of hearing that simple song of the violin, of a real violin, and compare it to being at a party at a techno party and hearing all that, complex type of sounds mixed together. And yeah, it gives you a rush, but that's the thing. See, it just gives you a rush in the moment. But then you want something else. You want a new rush. You want something more complex than that. And you just spiral more. You just move more and more into wanting something more complex, more uh, mixed together, more, because it doesn't have the essence that you need. It bores you because it lacks the essence that you truly need. Whereas I can say from my experience, you can be in a room and just listen to a violin playing, and you can stay like that in a sort of mesmerizing internal awe, left completely in a state of internal awe for even an hour without getting bored or feeling bored. Sometimes you don't even know how time passes when you are in the presence of somebody which plays a simple song on a violin or on a guitar, or it's just so inspiring. You lose time, you don't understand, you just lose yourself in that beauty, in that song, in that music. But that's not the same with parties, with techno parties, with all that complex music, so many sounds. It's just so many sounds, and then that's not enough. You want drugs, and then that's not enough. You want alcohol mixed with drugs, and then that's enough. You want, two sexes in that night, two partners for sex in that night, and then that's not enough. And you wanna, go and throw yourself in the cold water of the ocean if that party is near the ocean. That's not enough, and it's just spirals on and on and on. Then you make a cocktail of drugs. It's just spirals on and on because it lacks the essence. It lacks the essence. And I started to observe this thing with food. Like when I'm eating the most simplest food, the most simplest ingredients, and I eat them just more raw, more on their own, let's say. I can feel the taste of them, and I enjoy each taste, each spoon of it, if it's a simpler food. But if you add more and more complexity to it, if you add more taste, more, spices, more of the stuff, it just becomes a thing which is enticing to the mouth, it's enticing to the tongue. It just gives me a high because, oh my god, it's so spicy, but I eat it I eat it fast, the complex one, because gives me so much rush and I want more of it. But at the end, it's just like it doesn't nourishes me the same as if I would eat a simpler thing. Just right now, before I started recording this, and I'm gonna give off a personal detail here. But I stopped eating white sugar for many years now, and I usually use honey for sweetness, and sometimes I use coconut sugar when I cannot use honey in some recipes. And I have a jar with coconut sugar, and I really like the taste of it. It just has this taste of caramelized sugar of sorts. It has its own individual aroma and individual flavor. And sometimes I just eat it just like that. I just take a spoon and I and I'm eating raw coconut sugar, and I just enjoy each spoon of it. It's just raw coconut sugar. It's nothing complex. It's not a cake. It's just a raw ingredient. But it gives me so much pleasure just to eat it like that on its own. And it's similar with vegetables. Like If I make a salad, I like to keep it more simple. And foods in general, I like to keep them more simple. Although I have, let's say, my own style of creating complex things, like making some fancy sauce, or but then you have the simpler things, and then you have the complex sauce, and you can mix them. Or it's just I like to not mix them from the start and just leave them like that, and I mix them if I want in the process of eating. But this is what got me to observe that it's much this like observing how food is being received by the body is what got me to observe this detail with simplicity versus complexity. It's because I feel much more nourished by the simplest things. And then I realize like it's the same with everything. It's the same with living conditions. Like I'm living here in this house, which is an old house, but it's done from natural materials. It's done only from clay. The walls here, these are clay walls. It's nothing more here than clay and some straws, probably. And it's a simpler house. It's something simple. And there is a certain feeling in these houses. It's not only me which I've observed this. Many other people have noticed this feeling that you sleep better in these houses. It's just a general feeling of something more. It's like you feel better in one of these simpler house made out of clay. But then if you go to a villa, like some of my, acquaintances have, it's nice, it's really, modernly decorated or whatever. It's But it's not the same feeling. It doesn't have the same feeling. It's just more sterile in a way. Although it is complex, it has all these appliances and it has all these, you know, facilities. Here, for example, there is not even a shower or a bathroom here in this house right now. I have to improvise somehow when I wash. But in one of these villas, you have all the facilities. You have bathroom and it's fancy and have all the appliances and no, yeah, you have all those commodities, but it doesn't give you the same satisfaction. It doesn't nourishes you in the same way. It just, it's more comfortable, but it lacks essence. It lacks something. And this is why you feel more and more dissatisfied. And this is why you want a bigger house. You have a house, then you want a bigger house, or you want to redecorate it all the time, or do stuff to it all the time because it's just like you just there is a missing essence in the place that you're living. But see, if we would build again with natural materials and we would make this type of natural houses with breathable walls and natural materials, I can attest from my experience and the experience of others that you just feel better. You have, let's say, much more. You don't have maybe all the conditions, although you can build the same conditions if you want in a natural home as well, in a natural house as well. But let's say you might have simpler conditions, but you'll see that you'll feel more alive. You'll feel just better. Just by having less, you'll feel better. It's about returning to simplicity. And as we have more and more complex things, even though they are enticing at first, usually at some point, we get bored with them and we want something else and we want something even more complex. We want to try even that shade of that perfume and that perfume and that one and that one. And then you become a perfume aficionado and you collect perfumes and you go to, yeah, that's a way to experience life. But see, if you truly want a moment of nourishment, if you truly want to find that true, unmistakable, undescribable, silent, let's say, invisible satisfaction that nobody can put its finger on and say, that's why it exists or that's where it comes from. If you want to feel in that way again, search for the simpler things. Create simple experiences for yourself. A simple dish, a simple, you know, condition, living condition, a simple relationship. Just instead of having 10 friends, 20 friends, just focus on two. Just create simpler things. Just create two, three relationships and devote yourself, give your best to these relationships and make the most out of them. It's like I never enjoyed a relationship more than when I had a close relation with somebody which we were going deeper and deeper and deeper and finding out even more about ourselves, even more, into intimacy, into discovery. It's like the satisfaction that I have from going so intimate with somebody in a relationship. Even I'm not speaking romantically right now. It's like a family member, a friend. Like there's unmatchable. It's unmatchable when two people come together and they devote time to each other. It's like it's never boring. I can never get bored of a person ever. It's just each day it's so new. God, what came out of you today is just like it's mesmerizing. And then tomorrow it's something more, something else. God, what a mind do you have? God, what a imagination or creativity or whatever. We just it's an endless fountain of oh instead of having 10 friends, and going all of you going on a trip. It's gonna be more superficial. You're never gonna go to those you know depths with a person where you can almost feel the soul of that being. You can touch that soul and you can be touched in your soul as well. It's never the same quality. Even if two, three, four people go to a trip, it's already diluting. But try to go one on one with somebody in a forest, anywhere. Do something one on one. So different. So it's about simplicity. It's like the essence of life lies in the simplest things. Yeah, we can have thrill and enjoyment by the complex things, but eventually, if we only go into complexity, we are gonna get bored and dissatisfied eventually. It's just at first it appears like there's no limit for complexity. You can go and spiral into more and more and more complexity and invent more and more and more stuff because there's no upper limit in a way. You can always create more complexity. But see, in a way, there is no upper limit in terms of the things that you can experience, perhaps, but there is an upper limit to the way you are experiencing them. So it's about the how, not the what. The what might indeed be able to be invented endlessly, more and more whats, but the how diminishes. It's the essence. It's how you experience a thing which diminishes because when things become too complex, your ability to experience them with your, let's say, how can I call this, like your true essential being, your true awareness, focused, you know your focus of awareness, you'll see how as much as a thing it's complex, you'll almost be unable to fully experience it to its totality. So it's always gonna escape you, that experience, that complex experience. It's always gonna escape you. This is why you feel more and more unsatisfied with it. But see, when a thing is very simple, it gives you much more space to bring your being there and experience it with your totality. And it's that how, see, It's how you experience a thing. It's not necessarily what you experience, but it's also the how. If I am able to eat a food with my totality, a simpler food, like a simple apple, just eat one apple. Don't make an apple pie. Just eat an apple, just like that. But you'll see how easy it is. It's much more easy to eat it with your totality. But try to eat an apple pie with a lot of cinnamon, with a lot of spices, or maybe a pumpkin pie with a lot of spices, or something spicy. You'll see how it's almost like you can't be fully there in the moment with that food, because you're gonna drift into thoughts. You're gonna start thinking of so many things, but you won't be able to be there in the moment with that food. But if you try a simpler thing like a simple apple, you'll see how it's much more easy to be there with your totality while in the process, in the experience of eating it. So by eating that way the apple, you'll see the difference. It's just like completely different quality of experience when you are able to experience a thing with more and more of who you are, more and more of your totality is able to experience a thing, rather than to experience a thing with only a tiny bit of yourself, because the rest is just scattered all around and you can't pull put yourself together to experience so much complexity at once. And this is why, for example, we feel rejuvenated in nature as well, because nature is simple. It has a certain simplicity about it. It has a certain bareness about it, a certain virginity about it. There's something really primal about nature in comparison with our modern society and the things we invent and the cities and technologies and so on. See all these things, all these technologies, the digital media, the games, the video games, the social media, all these things. We have a plethora of images now. We can scroll the phone and see so many sceneries of so many places on earth, like Niagara Falls and the Grand Canyon and who knows what. So many things we can just see them with the tip of our finger. You can scroll hundreds of images in an hour. You've been to hundreds of places in an hour, but see, it's not the same. It doesn't have the same substance as if you would have been physically there experiencing those things with your body. So digital media is the same, follows the same formula. It's something much more complex, because now you have an intermediary technology. You're not going with your body and experiencing with your body a certain place. Now you have to have technology. Now you have to have an account on some social media platforms. It just there are more intermediary steps between you and a certain experience, and these intermediary steps create the complexity, which ends up to stripping you away from the bareness of the experience that you can have when you go to a place and you experience it with your body, which is part of nature, and you experience it directly with your senses. This is why you feel a certain nourishment from nature whenever you go in a certain place, rather than how nourished do you feel if you see a picture of that place on your phone. It's incomparable, right? So this is the formula here. It's like, as much as complexity is interesting for some time, and of course we are all, let's say, maybe curious in enjoying complexity, complex things, as much as we also have to keep in mind to return to simplicity constantly. Because without simplicity, if we only go into complexity, that's the formula for, that's the end, let's say, the end goal for dissatisfaction. As much as we are only going into complexity, searching more and more and more and more complex things on all the levels of our being, more and more relationships, more and more places, a bigger house, a bigger car, a bigger whatever, the fanciest perfume, the nicest of clothing, the most designer made, and Nike or whatever. It's just like you are gonna have all this complexity, but you are gonna feel more and more dissatisfied and empty because the essence, again, the essence is gonna be missing more and more from your life. So, how would it be if we would learn how to return to simplicity and have some areas in our life in which things are done really simple and thus in a much more close way, by the way, because this is another thing with simplicity. If you see the example, simplicity always boils down to closeness, right? For example, if you go on a trip with a certain friend and you go in a one-on-one trip, you'll see the close bonding that you can do with that person. But try to go in that trip with 5 people or 10 people, you won't get that close to any of them. So then it's similar to how the difference between going in nature with your body and seeing a certain place. Let's say you're going to the Grand Canyon and you're going there in person with your body and experiencing the Grand Canyon. It's like a certain approach. See, you approach it physically, you are close to it. But try to look at pictures with the Grand Canyon from your phone. There's no true approach, there is no closeness, there's no, it's lacking. See the exchange which is of essences which can only be done in close proximity. So see, simplicity also brings us to a close encounter with a thing. As much as we downshift into simplicity, as much as we approach things again, as much as we get close to them again. But as much as we spiral up into complexity, as much as we detach from the things that we are experiencing, from the complex things that we are experiencing. So it's about touching or detaching, going more and more into touching a certain thing, being close to it, being in proximity to it, being there with your totality, experiencing more of its totality, and having this exchange, or experiencing more and more things which appear fancy and novel and shiny and complex, but being unable to fully touch them, to fully connect with them. It's always a detachment with complexity. It's always, you have to be detached. And it's always a close encounter, a close touch with everything which is simple. And again, the essence is in simplicity. That's where the essence is found. So, how would it be if we learn to downshift and to regain again our simpler nature? I'm not saying we should eat, for example, all the time just simpler things, but how would it be if we would introduce more and more simplicity in our eating? And we would enjoy foods and we just eat a simple apple and just be there with it. Or simpler relationships, or simpler ways of living, or simpler forms of clothing, for example, natural materials, which are much more like linen, like wool, like uh, cotton. These natural materials, see, they are much more close to their origins. They come from nature. They are, of course, processed in a way, but they are not so complex. They just retain their natural molecules of linen, of wool, of it's much more close to their origins, it's much more close to simplicity. And it makes you feel better. Just try wearing linen or other natural materials, cashmere, wool, cotton, 100% cotton, let's say, clothing. It just creates a sensation on the body which is unmatchable by any synthetics. So, how would it be if in some areas of our life we would return again to simplicity and experience simplicity? And we will learn to, let's say, downshift. That doesn't mean we should discard of all complexity, but I think at least there has to be a balance, right? Because if we go only in complexity and we create complex relationships and we go, we just complex way of living, complex music, complex relationships, complex food, we just go into complexity all the way, we are gonna feel extremely dissatisfied with our life. We are gonna feel we are missing something which we can't say we are, why we are missing it. But try to eat more simple things, try to dress more simple, try to live more simple, try to have simpler relationships and see where that gets you. Because I can tell you from my experience, again, simplicity is never boring. Counterintuitive to what we might have thought at first, it's simplicity which is never boring, and complexity is always boring, although selling that it's not. Complexity tries to sell itself as the ever enticing thing, which you never can get bored of it, but it's on the contrary. You much more easy get bored of complexity and almost never get bored of simplicity. With simplicity, you can stay there for eternity and it's never boring. You can spend a lifetime with a person, and if you devote yourself, both of you, to that relationship, it's never boring, ever. You can eat simpler apples and you will feel more and more in love with apples. I started eating apples and or no, walnuts. So I'm eating walnuts each day for 2 months now. Simple walnuts, you know. Not I'm not making walnuts, you know, biscuits and so on. But I'm making those as well sometimes. But now the idea is that I love to just eat raw walnuts. I take them, I crack them, I eat them. The taste is unbelievable, and I get more and more in love with them. Just now I feel I want to just I can't wait for the moment of the day when I eat simple walnuts. It's just one of the most thrilling moments of my day right now. I have other food which I eat, and it's much more complex. But that moment when I eat walnuts is just like one of the best moments of my day. And just simple walnuts. Or when I eat an apple, because I started eating apples each day or pears, and now it's just like my body craves that apple. Like I have so much more complex food. I make biscuits, I make other stuff, you know. But my body is not like craving those. Not like, oh, when will I eat that? You know, biscuits or whatever. No, but it thinks about the apples. Paradoxically, it thinks like, oh God, when will I eat the apple? You know, it's because I'm much more close there with the apple. I'm much more. It's much more raw. It's much more close to its origins. It's much more um, processed. You know, it's just much more close to its origins, and thus much more simple, and thus it has much more essence in it. It nourishes me in a way biscuits do not. Although biscuits are interesting to the taste, they lack something the essence, let's say, more of the essence that a simple apple has.